I'm Tony Brown. We're at the 2008 Candidate Forum. Right now is a powerful time to be a part of Portland, Oregon. It's a lot of transition going on. If you go from the west side to the east side, if you go from the north to the south, you're going to see huge cranes. So the city is building, but the question is, where are we going? We have a new government, we have a new mayor, we have a new governor, we have a new mayor, and we also have a new police chief, and we also have a new Supreme Court justice. So the question is, where are we going now? We have a candidate here who's going to talk to you about, not because she's in the political race, but she's going to talk about the differences that she wants to make. Please welcome Ms. Julie. Please tell us why you are in the race.
All right, I'm running for Portland City Council Position 2 that is currently held by Commissioner Nick Fish. And I'm running for office because it is past time for the city to prioritize the needs of people over developer profits, corporate interests, and complacent politicians. And that's specifically why I'm running against an incumbent, because what our city needs and what Portlanders deserve is actual system change. It is abundantly clear that the commission form of government and these at-large election systems that we currently have are not designed to serve the people of the city. In fact, they're rooted in the Jim Crow era and really designed to exclude folks from entering and running for public office who are lower income or come from a minority background. And it's past time for us to update that. And also, 5 commissioners representing a city of over 700,000 people is not representation. And all but one city commissioner currently lives in Southwest Portland. And since I live east of 82nd Avenue, if I were elected tomorrow, I would be the only commissioner from Southeast Portland, let alone east of Cesar Chavez Boulevard. So that's not representation, and it really shows. I live in Southeast Portland. The roads around my house don't have sidewalks. Some of them are not paved. And I really think that if we had a representative form of government where we elected city council members from districts from throughout the city and had those council members responsible to their constituents, we would have real solutions to our problems. And frankly, I think we would have avoided the housing crisis and a lot of the major problems we're facing right now if we'd had a representative form of government. So it's past time for us to make this change, and it is my lead platform issue to create an equitable representative form of government for Portlanders.
You spoke about districts. How do you feel about advocating or endorsing single-member districts, and why?
Well, I strongly support creating districts. I want to make sure that we have a conversation with members of every community in the city of Portland in order to come up with a representative form of government that works for us and a form of elections that works for us. And that might be single-member districts. I'm not doing the technocratic solution where I am going to tell everyone how it's going to be. I want to have a conversation with experts and with community groups and small businesses and folks from every part of the city to come up with a representative form of government that people can actually support, because ultimately this is going to have to go to the ballot box. And I think that what's been missing in the past from this conversation is that community involvement in co-creating a districted form of government that actually represents us and that people can agree to. So it may be single-member districts, but I do know that a strong mayor system is probably never going to pass at the ballot box, so I think that's a non-starter for Portlanders. And we have to increase the number of folks on council in order to have real representation. Whether or not it's single members or multiple member districts or what that actual format looks like, I think remains to be seen, and I want us to have a real conversation to come up with that.
If you become a city council, how would you deal with the recent violence that's going on in our schools, particularly the shootings? What are your plans to address that issue?
So, in terms of violence in general, I mean, I think first of all, it might sound counterintuitive, but generally, I don't think that there should be police in schools. You know, I don't think that actually helps keep our students safer. If there is an actual active shooter incident going on, then of course we need to bring, public safety officers into that situation. But in terms of addressing violence in our schools and addressing violence in our communities, we need to have real gun laws, right? We need to get rid of any kind of semi-automatic weapons. Those should not be allowed to be owned by civilians. There's no reason for that. And I'm also I definitely support demilitarizing the police. They are designed to protect and serve civilians, and there's no situation I can think of in which a police need to show up with military level arming, right, or military level equipment. If your job is to protect civilians, you do not need to be showing up in military gear. So I think that would, but we really need common sense gun laws, and it's hard. As a city commissioner, I can't, the gun laws have to happen at the state and federal level. So I would work together with all the municipal governments, whether it's the county up to metro, to pressure the state to pass better common sense gun laws, because we're clearly not going to be getting anything from Congress anytime soon, which is another reason why I'm running for local level office. I think that's where we can actually make real change happen.
How do you feel if you become a councilwoman? How would you diversify your upper management?
So that's a really good question. I think in addition to making sure that we have representation in the election, in the elected leaders, we also need to have, representation on staff, right? So I'm absolutely committed to hiring folks who are local experts within their area of expertise onto my staff, and making sure that they're representative of Portland communities, right? I think that if you look on the council in the past, our city commissioners have had varying degrees of success at hiring diversity. I'm genuinely really committed to doing that, and also having a candidate in this race, Philip Wolf, who is a deaf individual, has really helped me learn that we need to have 100% accessibility at the city level. And I'm committed to finding a way to make that happen on my staff, as well as making sure that my staff is representing the diversity of the entire city.
We talk about diversity. Portland has a big issue with homeless, affordable housing. Let's address each one of them. The affordable housing, and then we'll address the homeless piece. Affordable housing, what is your plans to address that issue?
So in terms of affordable housing, the city needs to think outside of the developer box. I mean, the city has had decades to see this problem coming, and I think, frankly, did too little to prepare. And I think part of that is because they figured they could just rely on developers to build affordable housing. First of all, it's 10% here and 10% there. They don't enforce the affordable housing rules when they do urban renewal, as they call it. And a lot of the affordable units that are built by developers, whether or not they're affordable is debatable, and they're usually temporarily affordable, which means they're not permanently affordable. We need to be really serious. Every candidate in running for Portland City Council calls housing a human right. And every member of the existing council talks about housing as a human right. But we don't have policies that match that. And this is why I'm really promoting land banking, exploring community-owned land trusts, and really genuinely thinking outside of the developer box to solve this problem. Once you have community land trust model or even public housing models, you are moving the land from the equation, right? Which is the most expensive part at this point in time. It's the dirt you're building on. So if you invest in, if you have community land trusts, that creates permanent affordability. And we can do it on existing properties within the city that they currently own. We can acquire properties and make them into community land trusts. There's a lot of really creative ways that we can explore this. And you can also find bonding money in order to get that done that pays itself off, right? As you sell these units or rent them out, those bonds get paid off. So there's a really solid economic argument for this. And also you can hire locally, build up your local workforce and contract locally to build these units, which helps with the economy as well. So we really need truly permanently affordable housing at a much larger scale than we're currently doing it. I'm excited to see where the Metro bond goes. Again, I would have loved to have seen that decades ago. It's good to see these slow churning machines start to recognize that if you're doing development, you have to do affordable housing first. But I think we really need to be thinking outside of the developer box and making stronger commitments to really permanently solving this problem.
You mentioned three aspects there. It was land trust, land bond. What was the other one?
And land banking
land
is
banking.
another one of the
Can
options.
we address the land trust, talk a little bit about what that is, what that means, the land bond and the land?
So yeah, I mean, basically, under a land trust model, you can have whether it's a nonprofit or the city or a third entity of some sort that is actually the land trust that like owns the property, or that but that property is put into a trust into perpetuity or at 100-year spans of time at a time, and then you can use bonding money. You can do private bonds to pay to build, like, say, 200 units on that site. And there are investors that are willing to do this, where they have a longer term payoff at a lower rate. And what happens is that as you sell those units or as you rent out those units, it pays down that bond. Okay. So you don't have to do this at great expense to taxpayers necessarily. And since the land is in a land trust, it removes the land value from the value of those units, and that's what makes them permanently affordable, right? Okay. And we can apply this to businesses too. Businesses are getting squeezed out of Portland just like homeowners and renters. So you could have permanently affordable businesses on the first floor of these buildings as an option as well. And I forgot to mention, as part of the housing solution, the relocation was a huge step in the right direction. Okay. But we also need to fight the state, frankly, to remove the preemptions that stopped the city from doing rent control and making it permanently illegal for folks to be evicted for no cause. Right? We need to completely stop no cause evictions and remove the preemption from the state, so we can do some rent control and actually create some more stability in the rental market. Which is one of my questions. It's a dual question, and it came in through text. Some of the landlords with the issue dealing with the rent control. Mm-hmm. How do you, if you become the council, address the landlord's issues and the tenant's issues? How do you merge those together so everybody receives an equitable and fair outcome, basically, of this? Right. I mean, I think the vast majority of landlords are good and are perfectly happy to follow the relocation ordinance, because most landlords are not trying to raise their rents 10 or 20% at a time, right? Mm-hmm. So I really think that any system that is geared to be fair toward renters, but is also fair to, I'll put it this way. Under the current relocation rules, there have yet to be examples of landlords who are being extremely, damaged by this, right? Okay. So I think that we have to be really realistic about protecting our tenants' rights in a way that is, of course, fair to landlords, but I think that we're actually threading that needle really well right now. And something that I find, I'll put it this way, the Joint Office of Housing and Homelessness, one of the most successful programs they have right now is rental assistance, right? Okay. There's a bunch of folks who are this close to losing their home because they can't afford their rent, and they get a little bit of temporary assistance from the city to cover their rent so they can stay housed, and that leads to stabilization, right? These folks have seen on average, I think, of like $10,000 increase in their annual income by that stability being created in their lives. My only concern about that solution is that that's public dollars going to line the pockets of a landlord who's probably charging a little bit too much for rent, okay, right? And this is why I think I would prefer to approach a rent control that acknowledges the market, right? That is not a completely, draconian level of rent control for landlords, but that actually saves tenants from being unhoused. Because at the rate that we're going, we're going to become San Francisco in the next 5 to 10 years, right? People who live in the city now won't be able to afford to stay in the city, and that's unacceptable to me. I love the city, and I want to see people who live here now be able to see the benefits of this boom that you're talking about, right? We're not going to get there if we don't protect affordability in a really serious way. Which leads me to my next issue, homeless. Yes. If you become city council, how would you address? We know about the WAP2, mm-hmm, the jail. Wapato. Wapato, yeah. Wapato, thank you. We know about that. We know that it was at full capacity. We're talking about 700 beds. If you become city council, how would you address that issue? Well, I have to say I side with street roots on the Wapato issue, which is housing that large number of houseless individuals that far away from services, that far away from their jobs, that far away from the rest of our community is actually not a good way of serving the houseless population. If you, there's a really good opinion piece written up in the street roots that I really agree with there. We need to find a way to provide services to folks that is close to where they work. Because believe it or not, there's a lot of houseless individuals that have jobs, right? And there's a lot of houseless individuals who are houseless families, right? Who just got forced out of their homes. Is sending a family to a jail really going to help serve them, right? So I think that there's just, I understand the attraction of like, there's a lot of rooms there, but like, I mean, a jail was only ever designed, it's a dehumanizing space.
Oh, gotcha.
And I don't know that you can make it a humanizing space. And the fact that houseless advocates that I know and respect don't support Wabato as a homeless shelter really makes me pause and question that as a good solution. That said, I do think the Joint Office for Housing and Homelessness was a big step in the right direction. Again, it's one of those situations where I wish the city and county had acknowledged that combining their resources was a good idea 10, 20 years ago, right? It's you know, that's the kind of candidate that I am. I'm a systems thinker, and if I walk into a system and I see that the structure of it isn't working well, I want to change the structure of it to make it work. So I think that there's a lot of solutions that they're exploring that sound really good, and it just feels like too little too late all the time, right? Because we're waiting 5-10 years for these things to come online while the crisis is now. So I think that the other thing we need to get better at is decriminalizing houselessness. Police sweeps is not doing anything to serve them, and if you don't have a place for those folks to go, you should not be displacing them, right? We need to find real temporary solutions that actually provide people with these services and treat them with dignity. And it's very abundantly clear that police sweeps don't do either of those things. So we need to find a way to decriminalize houselessness and poverty and provide the services that they need and a place for them to stay.
Okay, thank you for coming. We have a question.
Thank you. My name is Professor Hall, and I would like to first salute you for running. Having ran for office, I know the courage that it takes. And I would also like to say that I've reviewed your remarks on a number of the city issues, and I found your remarks to be candid, detailed, and transparent. My questions surround two areas. First, the concept of single-member districts as a way to increase women and people of color participation. Was curious as to what you think, or if you're in favor of the concept. And then the second is it's the Portland, Prosper Portland, and its significant budget. Should that, as many people believe, agency be merged with the city's general operation, since those dollars come from the city's general fund? Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Those are two big questions.
Okay.
So to answer the single member district question, my lead platform issue is that we need representation and that we need to have folks in office who are representative of the city, both geographically and socioeconomically and as well as racially and ethnic wise. So we absolutely need to have full representation on council, and that means we need to shift to having city council districts where we're electing folks from every part of the city, and we're having those individuals be responsible to their constituents who got them into office, rather than having them responsible to the bureaus that are assigned to them by the mayor. So I absolutely do support that. In terms of whether or not they should be single-member districts, I really am supportive of a community-wide discussion about what we want to see from a districted form of government. And it's entirely likely that we're going to land on the single-member district solution, but I'm not doing that kind of technocratic top-down solution. I want us to have a community-led discussion so that this will actually pass the ballot box, because that's what ultimately needs to happen, is folks have to vote in favor of this. And two things I'm certain of. One is that a strong mayor system is not likely to be in the mix because people don't like that in Portland. But other than that, I'm not committing 100% to single-member districts, although I think that's entirely likely how this would end up going. In terms of Prosper Portland, we're talking about a massive budget, $88 million. A lot of that money is coming from the general fund. This is taxpayers' money. I think Prosper Portland investing in jumpstarting the economy during a recession is one thing. We're not having a recession. This is a booming economy. Our public money needs to be going into affordable housing projects, dealing with houselessness, and really investing in communities' needs. Again, I will reiterate, I live east of 82nd Avenue. Streets around my neighborhood don't have pavement on them or sidewalks. Some of the streets don't have lights. There's a lack of services out there, right? There are so many ways we can invest the kind of money existing in Prosper Portland that will more directly benefit our communities. Every one of those dollars should be spent within the city for the city.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. We have
I have a
another
couple
question from a young at
questions
heart.
here. One, you talk about landlords / management. I know people, and I have one of my sons that have to deal with this, living in apartments as to where they change management companies or management people, and every time they change, they want to use that no cause. Because he's educated and go to court, which he's had to bring in lawyers or what have you, where they want to charge each time that, different things are situated. Then they change management or what have you. Tenants don't have any rights. Landlords, you're talking about they're not making money? Yes, they do. You got realtors, brokers, developers, they're all in the same club.
Absolutely.
And it's definitely a money game.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what would you do, because it was one day I was watching City Hall when they addressed the issue of having affordable housing down by the Moda, I call it the Coliseum or whatever. That property there, you had your broker, your real estate person, developer, and what have you. They was telling their little story trying to get a budget. But the hidden clause, they came with a hidden clause, and it was about, prices increasing, paying off. And so, Nick Fish actually addressed it when he started asking questions, well, how much are you trying to get from the city and the county? They weren't ready or prepared for that. Like I said, they come with a hidden clause. It's not rocket science in the game that's being played.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to know, how would you address that when the people of interest that are trying to make money, I live on prime property, my taxes go up, I'm not making money. I'm retired, and I've actually worked for what I have. But the housing that they want the property to tear down and build so-called, they're not affordable housing. A house just sold for over almost $800,000 that's around the corner from me. I live over by PCC Cascade. What would you do if you're elected? Because I'm hearing this rhetoric again over and over. It's not new. But the thing is, what would you do to help eradicate? You're talking about fairness? It's not fair when people are actually, I've seen the relocation and what have you before. Being a native or whatever, I don't have a problem with change. I have a problem with coming in with hidden agendas, but the exclusiveness of the people, keep talking about community. It's not a community. I grew up in a neighborhood and a community. And transportation, regardless, Wapata, the next thing you talk about, it's unfair, housing people away from services. Isn't housing people in my tax-paying dollars building, which I didn't vote for or ask for, more accessible to people that needed the homelessness? See, the homelessness is not an issue of people in the street. I did social service. I know how it works.
So let her ask the first question.
Okay,
and
but the
she'll
question,
address
and
that.
what
Yeah.
would you do as far as with the transportation? Because most of the people that are sitting at the table controlling the strings on the budget or what have you, they got the max, they got transportation, the shuttles. Tell me, what would you do if elected to try to make an even playing field? Because, all this stuff,
Thank you for your
things have
question.
to change.
Thank you for
Yeah,
your
no, I
questions.
completely agree that things have to change. I want to get back to at saying obviously landlords are clearly making money, and
Okay.
they're absolutely doing it on the backs of folks who cannot afford their rent hikes. So this is exactly why I want to have rent control and get rid of no cause evictions. I mean, there's a huge problem there, and we have developers who are basically running the city, which is why I'm trying to change the system so that we can get some more checks and balances in there so that we're actually prioritizing the needs of people over the needs of developers and corporate profits. So, I mean, that's definitely why I'm pushing for this representative form of government, because if we actually had folks elected to office who represent their constituents and are held responsible to their constituents and actually know, because they're coming from a district, that if they don't make their constituents happy, that their seat might be up, that we would have much more responsible politicians who are responsive to the needs of their people. In terms of transportation, we absolutely need to extend services in the communities that need them the most, right? I live, again, in Southeast Portland. There is a lack of north-south bus lines out there. And there's also major air quality issues because the state of Oregon has some of the worst diesel pollution laws. It has the worst diesel pollution laws on the West Coast, which means that all the dirty diesel trucks that can't operate in California and that can't operate in Washington are ending up in the port of Portland. And they're getting stuck in the traffic and spewing some of the dirtiest diesel fumes in the neighborhoods that have frankly been displaced, right? So, I mean, it's this double whammy of negative effects on these communities. So we absolutely need to push for stronger air standard qualities on diesel transportation in the city in order to reduce the toxicity of our air. But in terms of getting TriMet to operate better, we absolutely need to change how it's managed. I mean, right now you have a group of folks that are appointed by the governor who run TriMet. They're not looking at TriMet from a regional perspective. And I think that shows in the way that they do services. So I really strongly support having a regionally controlled TriMet that's more invested in doing what's best for the people who live here in the metro area. And that means ultimately probably transferring it under the auspice of Metro, frankly. But we need to increase the services into the communities that need them the most. And I think having a representative form of government is going to help make that happen faster.
Thank you for your question.
How do you match the increase of services within the communities when you have $400,000 or $500,000, loss, apartments, or what have you, in the city? Because everybody's trying to move to the city, which is accessible for them, and businesses open up bars and taverns, but they don't have money for schools.
Thank you for your
How
question.
would you handle
Comment.
that?
Yeah, no, we need to have, I mean, this is why I support creating permanently affordable housing in every single area of the city, and also addressing where affordability currently exists and ensuring that we have strong, enforceable anti-displacement policies before we do urban renewal or development in these neighborhoods, because that's what we've always failed to do, right? And historically in this city, they built some kind of transportation project. I mean, look at what happened in Milwaukee. They built a max line out to Milwaukee, and all of the affordability just disappeared. And it's because they didn't plan ahead. And what I'm saying is that as we continue to change and build in this city, we need to be really serious about making what's currently affordable permanently affordable and having strong enforceable anti-displacement policies so that as we develop, the people who've lived here can enjoy the city and participate in its growth, not get shut out. And that just means different priorities. You know, the city has always blamed the market for why people got displaced. I'm like, no, it was bad policy that got people displaced. And we need political leaders who are willing to, from the beginning of these development projects, ensure that there's true anti-displacement and an investment in keeping people where they live.
Thank you. We have a question.
Hi, I'm Dr. Audrey Terrell. I'm president and CEO of the Dr. Audrey Terrell Institute, whose mission is to expose, support, encourage, direct, and lead the underserved youth into making choices, positive choices, career choices. I'm asking you, what would you do to support DATI as we step forward? And I work with a lot of youth, a lot of high schools. What's in your mindset? What are your plans when you take position to support us as we try to direct these kids to productive social living? So you don't have these gangs and shootings and stuff. I just believe if you start early with them, directing them with intern jobs, all these people coming in here, get them some internships in these jobs. What is your focus? And so you can support DATA in our efforts.
Okay,
Thank you for your question.
Yeah,
Please.
thank you for that question. I have a few layers to the answer. I want to mention really briefly that I just recently came out with a proposal for raising revenue on those who are benefiting the most from this booming economy. It's called the Basic Rights and Social Services Tax Proposal. And the reason why we're proposing it is one of the lead things I want to fund with that is universal preschool, because there's a lot of incredible research about the outcomes of providing that. It provides both childcare to folks who struggle to find childcare, and children who have access to high quality preschool end up staying in their communities, stay out of jail, end up becoming really productive members of society. That the stats are astonishing, and we just need to do it. We can raise the money, and we can have universal pre-K provided similarly to how we provide K through 12, right? Public, it'd be an extension of our public schools. I think that is something I'm absolutely committed to working on. In terms of students that are currently in the K through 12 system and what we can do to help them, I think we don't do nearly enough to match students in our middle through high schools to jobs. They can get them into apprenticeship programs upon graduating, right? They can be partnering both with local businesses and community colleges so that by the time they graduate, they are pre-qualified for an apprenticeship program where within 5 years of graduating, they can be making like upper middle class wages, right? And these are really good jobs, and we are not doing nearly enough to get kids into that pipeline, right? We've really emphasized going to college and a liberal arts college, and I went to college. I'm not saying people shouldn't go to college, but I think that we don't encourage the trades nearly enough, especially in the STEM, in STEM as well. So I would really like to see a much larger partnership and investment from the private industry and partnership between our municipalities and public schools to have a much stronger pipeline from schools into these apprenticeship programs. Because the other cool thing with that is you end up having a strong, robust local workforce. And like right now, the city hires from out of state all the time for stuff because they can't find a local workforce. I'm like, we are one of the most unemployed and underemployed city. People have like 3 or 4 gigs and they still can't make their ends meet. And I'm like, let's get people into the trades. We need to be doing it. And I think that the best way to do it is to target the youth and get them on that path. So that's something I'd be interested in looking into.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your comment. We have another question, please.
Thank you for your reply to Dr. Terrell's question, because what we've seen historically is wonderful small programs are not getting financially supported, and the large programs are gobbling up the dollars that quite frankly should go for smaller programs. My question has to do with an administrative perspective. Every single cycle, elected officials from both the county, the city, and state go before panels and talk about diversity, the commitment to equity, and yet when they are elected, they have yet to hire an African American or person of color to be a chief of staff. Ted Wheeler did a remarkable and courageous thing by hiring this city's first African American female to be the chief of police. What courage or what commitment will you make to ensure us, as we deliberate who to vote for, that you won't just hire us for the secretary position, although that's good because it's good to be employed, but that you will allow us to be your lead advisor and or your second advisor?
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I am absolutely. I mean, some of the most incredible folks that I've met on this campaign and who I'm working with are from the African American community and from other diverse communities. And it is abundantly clear to me that there is a deep pool to hire from within the city of Portland. And I'm absolutely committed to hiring a diverse staff because I think that our actions have to match our words. That's the entire premise of my campaign. I'm not taking corporate money to make it clear that I stand with people and that my actions will match my values. And of course, I can't demonstrate that until I'm elected, but I can promise you that if elected, you're going to see that diversity on my staff because I don't think it's kind of similar, like Nick Fish will tell us that that the east side of Portland can just depend on the kindness of the elected commissioners from the Southwest to eventually get it right for us, right? And I'm like, no, I want some representation, right? I think that I trust folks from the southeast of Portland to represent themselves and get services that we need and deserve. I feel it's really important that people with a lived experience and background are on my staff to give me good advice on coming up with policies that are going to actually work for our communities. So I'm committed to hiring the diversity that is necessary in order to come up with good solutions that are going to actually work for the people who live here.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for comment. The next question, if you become city council member, police reform. What are your plans and how would you address that?
So yeah, we have a huge problem in the city of Portland with police accountability, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better even with this DOJ settlement and investigation. Most recently from the city's auditor, when she looked into the gang task force, despite being told to get rid of the list, they still have a secret list, and they've pulled over, I mean, what was it, 90% of the folks they're pulling over are young African Americans? Like, this is in a city where 6% of the population is African American. If that's not profiling, I don't know what is, right? So we have to change the police culture, you know, and this idea that the mayor has of hiring 90 new armed police officers into this broken culture that clearly isn't accountable, it sounds like an absolutely terrible idea. And I've heard the concerns about the fact that they're understaffed and they can't respond to the 911 calls in a timely manner. And I'm like, okay, let's explore having more mental health first responders. Let's explore having more unarmed officers on bikes who are actually in communities and maybe actually able to form relationships with communities because they're less intimidating because they're not armed, right? I mean, I feel uncomfortable talking to someone with a gun on their belt. That does not make me feel comfortable, you know, and especially in communities that have been historically targeted and have had individuals murdered from their communities, there's no reason for them to feel comfortable around an armed officer. So I'm willing to, look into having investing in more mental health first responders and unarmed public safety individuals who are maybe on bikes and able to actually form relationships and respond to the majority of 911 calls that don't require an armed officer to respond to them, right? And I think that also gets at a more service-oriented way of solving these problems because most of our 911 calls are coming out of issues that are stemming out of poverty, people who have mental health issues, and drug issues, right? And all those people, what they need are either access to services or economic opportunity. So I would much rather spend money investing in our communities so that we can increase public health and reduce crime in that way. And I don't see how investing more in armed officers is going to help get us there at this point in time. They have done nothing to demonstrate that they can get this right. And I'm really concerned too about a contract that makes it basically impossible to fire problem police officers. If you're known to use excessive force based on race or mental health issues, you absolutely should be held to account. So anyway, there's major accountability issues and issues with the police contract, and until we really get at these root issues, I don't think we should be hiring more armed officers.
What would you consider, if you became a city council member, 2 or 3 of the root issues of police reform that we just spoke about? Because you mentioned there's some roots. What would the 3 roots be that we need to get at? And
Well,
how can the citizens support you? in
Right, so I
this?
think we need real citizen oversight that has some actual power. There needs to be accountability, which means actual consequences when you don't meet the police expectations and standards, right? The job is too important to write it off when people misbehave, especially when, and misbehave isn't even the right word, when an officer uses excessive force or kills an individual, that absolutely, there needs to be consequences for that action if it's not to be found to be done in a proper way. And lastly, we need to, excuse me, I lost my train of thought there for a second. We need more community oversight. We need to have, and I think we also just need to, training, that was the last one, sorry. So the last one is we need more, I mean, it's a bit of a challenging thing, is like the police get a lot of training sometimes and then still don't change. But this is where like they need the training so that we can have a strong expectation of, and they know what the expectation is, and then that training needs to be followed up with consequences if you don't meet it, right? I think another really good example of this was there was an Oregonian article on how the police are using tasers, and they were not found to be, there's numerous officers who were repeatedly found to not be in compliance with how you're supposed to use a taser. And they all ended up being found to be within compliance, you know? And I'm just like, well, if you're gonna have a standard and then you're not gonna hold police to that standard, what's the point of having that standard, right? So like, they're gonna have another training. And I'm like, okay, all right, we'll do one more training. But now, after that, let's have there be some consequences if they don't follow those rules.
Thank you for your comment. The next question would be, if you become city council member, how would you address the violence in our high schools today?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like I think we absolutely need to have stricter gun regulations. And in terms of what we can do within our schools, there's Marysville Elementary School, I think is the name of it, won an award for mindfulness. And that school has been transformed by creating a school-wide culture around mindfulness. Kids are taught to meditate, to sit and breathe. If they're feeling themselves get agitated in some way, they're learned how to de-escalate, situations. Actually, that should have been part of my police answer. They need to be highly trained in de-escalation. I want to put that in there.
Okay.
I just totally realized that was a massive component. That should have been one of the number 3, is we need to highly train in de-escalation police officers. But the kids are, in this mindfulness-centered school, given a lot of tools on how to deal with their interpersonal conflicts and how to even deal with their own internal processes, right? It's built into the school culture. And it has been transformative for the teachers and the students. I don't see why we can't recreate that across the board, right? That's something that it doesn't cost more money. It's just how we actually run the school. So, and I think that also shows a perfect example of that school didn't need more, police officers on site to make people feel safer. They needed to change how they behaved with each other, right? So I think that that's something that's really worth looking into, is how do we extend that really incredible model that's been proven to work across the entire school system. Let's try that.
Thank you for the next question. We spoke about the U.S. settlement by the Honorable Judge Simons. We spoke briefly about that. What is your What is your opinion, if you will, on the process as it is taken today? And if it should be redirected back to the judge?
Yeah, you know, I missed the ruling on Thursday, but from what I've heard, it sounds, how to put this, I think we need far more community oversight of the police, and the DOJ settlement process is not exactly instilling a ton of faith for me and their ability to get at the root causes of these issues. So I find it concerning.
Okay. We have a question?
Yes, as a professor, I was one of the researchers for the DOJ effort with the faith community. And what transpired, and I have a question because it, to me, goes to the integrity of the city council. What transpired was that there were two phases. The first phase, the judge said that there's a problem. And he said that I'm going to put together and mandate a 5-year plan for reform. So there was victory, and that policy was going to be improved upon. And the context was go from win-lose to a win-learn for all. So once the $5 million were identified by the judge, then the community, really at the chagrin of myself and a number of other folks, agreed to allow the city to hire or do the employment process of who was going to get the $5 million contract, which also had an ad package of $75,000 per year, which suggests that the $1 million per year wasn't enough, but I'm not going to talk about that. So the city then comprised a process where that it was a candidate pool of all white men vying for a $5 million contract. No women, no people of color. They dwindled it down to 4 candidates, of which 2 candidates were forwarded to the mayor, which those 2 candidates were still controversy. 2 weeks passed, then the mayor announced the person that was going to manage the $5 million project, which turned out to be Dr. Rosenbaum, who didn't even make it in the finals. And so the community had an outcry and said, how can someone that was 0 become number 1? And then when the research was done, it found that the city attorney's office created an ordinance, gave it to the city council, Amanda, Fritz, Nick Fish, Dan Salzman, and then Charlie Hales, and they passed it, giving the city attorney's office the authority to award the $5 million contract to the person that did not finish in the finals. Well, a number of ethical issues there. Number one, the city had filed motions, over 3 motions, to kick out the settlement agreement, and now they're being a city attorney's office is being allowed to hire the person who didn't make it in the finals. And so the question was, then the model was developed, which was, let us allow this person to run everything, and then this person then went to the editorial board, disrespected volunteers who were supposed to be on the oversight, suggesting that they didn't know what they were doing because they were calling into question not only his integrity, but the corrupt process.
And your question to...
And
Mr.
so
Okay.
I wanted to give the history
Yes.
to pose the question. As a city commissioner, would you have demanded a meeting with Judge Simon to denounce this process and ask him to start that process over? Or would you have went along with everyone else along this process, which in the words of my grandfather, didn't cut the mustard for the citizens who were disrespected and gave their time to get a quality candidate?
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, I mean,
Ms.
I 100% agree with transparency and accountability in government. It's why I'm trying to change the structure, because I believe the commission form of government makes it really easy to have exactly those kinds of non-transparent, non-accountable processes. I would like to think that before it got that far out of hand, I would have been a strong advocate for having an open process that included community members. From every step of the process, right? That included the people who were on the oversight board. I don't think they should have ever been removed from the equation, right? So I mean, from the beginning, I would have advocated for a different process, and I certainly would have raised a red flag at the point that we were thinking, oh, let's go through the attorney's office instead of. I mean, like, I mean, the hypothetical question is challenging for me because I want to believe that if I were on council, it wouldn't have gotten to that point, right? I just would have been like, whoa, this doesn't look like the right process for me. So, and I think that the better answer, frankly, is about my style, right? Which is that across the board, when we're having hiring processes, we need to be incredibly transparent, and we need to think about what process do we want to use that actually includes the community and helping us hire the right people that are going to be serving them, right? I think we're always going to be served better by having transparency and accountability than by doing these decisions behind closed doors.
Thank you for your question. Thank you for your comment. We have 3 minutes left.
Okay.
And I would like to give those 3 minutes to you to address the audience here and the viewing audience on your platform.
Okay.
And it's all you.
All right. So again, my name is Julia DeGraw. I'm running for Portland City Council Position 2, and I am the system change candidate. I am talking about changing the way the city operates that will actually serve the needs of people. In terms of issues, that means I support city council districts where we will elect folks from every section of the city and have them be accountable to their constituents. Rather than have a commission form of government in which we have city commissioners who are accountable to their city bureaus. Just because a city elected official can win a city-wide election does not mean that they are qualified to run a bureau. That said, I also strongly support the city provide public services to folks. One of the issues that didn't come up today that I think is really exciting is I support municipal broadband. The city should provide internet service as a utility to the public. Right now, people are like, millions of dollars are just flowing out of our city into the pockets of Comcast. The city could create a huge local a ton of local jobs, laying the line to build municipal broadband that would be affordable and accessible to every Portlander. If you are looking for services, if you are looking for work, if you are a student, you need access to the internet. This is an equity issue, and I'm the only candidate talking about this. And it's just a political will issue. Other cities have done this. It protects net neutrality, and it provides internet to everyone who needs it, which is everyone. So anyway, in addition to that, I'm taking no corporate cash because I want to make it clear that I stand with people. You can learn more at www.julia4pdx.com, Julia, the number 4, pdx.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Best of luck to you.
Yeah, thank you.